Hi everyone, my name is Bridget Karp, and today I'm going to talk about how to make pesto with some variations. Pesto is one of my favorite sauces, and I enjoy it so much because it's very versatile. It can go with a lot of different dishes, and it's pretty easy to make. But there's sort of this misconception that you have to make with the traditional ingredients, such as basil, pine nuts, and citrus fruit, and Parmesan cheese. So what I want to go over today is some different ways to make it, how you can use it, and what's absolutely essential to make a pesto sauce. So the traditional pesto recipe includes basil, pine nuts, Parmesan, fresh lemon juice, olive oil, garlic, and salt and pepper. So what you absolutely need is not those exact ingredients, but something that is green, so either a leafy green like you would use in a salad, or an herb, a type of nut or seed, a type of cheese, one that's preferably a salty hard cheese, a type of citrus fruit or something acidic, some type of oil, and then the spices or the seasonings you absolutely need are garlic and then salt and pepper. So for the something green category, other than basil, you can use items such as arugula, kale, spinach, parsley, cilantro, green onion, chives, on and on. Anything that's green that can be blended up easily. So I like to make pesto if I have leafy greens or herbs that are starting to reach their expiration date, because since you're going to blend them up into a sauce, it won't really matter that they're at their best or at their freshest. And you can have more than one green. So if you just have a little bit of parsley, for example, and then you have a whole bag of kale in your fridge that you haven't used yet, you can combine them together, so you're not limited to using just one type of green in your pesto. So our next category is nuts. So other than pine nuts, which can be expensive at some grocery stores, you can use these alternatives that include walnuts, pecans, almonds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, any sort of nut that is unsalted and unroasted, because you don't want the salted and roasted flavors to be in your pesto because you're going to be adding seasonings. So any sort of nut that has those qualities is fine to use. You could use something like peanuts if you wanted. I would stay away from peanuts only because they're a very strong flavor of themselves and you don't want them to take over your pesto sauce. If you are allergic to nuts, make sure to omit those. You could use one of the C options, or you can just omit them altogether, which is another option. Okay, so our cheese category. So other than Parmesan, also known as Parmigiano Reggiano, there's Asiago, Grana Padano, which is similar to Parmesan, Pecorino Romano, Gorgonzola, Manchego, Mozzarella. I would recommend using a salty hard cheese like Parmesan, but if you don't have that in your store, or if you have something in the fridge that isn't a salty hard cheese, you can use it. It's just important to keep in mind that if you use a creamy soft cheese such as brie in your pesto, that you're going to end up with a creamy, milkier pesto. So if you're fine with that consistency, great. If you don't want that, then avoid using those cheeses. And if you are making this recipe dairy-free or vegetarian or vegan, you can omit the cheese entirely. So for our citrus category, options other than fresh lemon juice are bottled lemon juice, lime juice, which is fine, fresh or bottled, grapefruit or yuzu, which is an Asian sort of lemon orange flavor that's really nice. You need some sort of acid in your pesto because you need to cut through the cheese if you've opted to use it, and the salt content of the pesto. Otherwise, it's just sort of lacking that element. You can use an orange. It is a citrus fruit. However, it's sweet. So it's not like your lemon, it's not like your lime where it has as much acid, so you will need to balance it out with salt. And if citrus isn't available, maybe it's not in season where you live or you have trouble getting access to it, you can use something like vinegar, so a white wine vinegar, a red wine vinegar, just something that provides that acidic content in your pesto. So next we have our oil category. So options other than olive oil include canola or vegetable oil, avocado oil, or sesame oil. The oil you choose has to be able to be drizzled in. So some oils, such as coconut oil, they're usually cold pressed and they come in more of a solid. So if you wanted to use coconut oil, you would have to melt it down so you can pour it. I would avoid coconut oil because, again, that's another strong flavor, and you don't want coconut to be your main flavor in your pesto. You really kind of want those herbs and those greens to shine through. So I would recommend olive oil as the first go-to, but canola oil, you could use any of these other oils or another type of oil as long as you can drizzle it in, because the oil acts as an emulsifier. So it combines your acids, your liquids, all of your cheeses, and it just helps it to combine better. And then for our last category, we have seasoning. So you should always put garlic and salt and pepper in, and make sure to taste it at the very end so you can determine if you need more salt, if you need more acid, if you need more cheese, so you can balance all of the seasonings and the flavors correctly. If you're not a fan of garlic, that's fine, but it really adds to the pesto sauce, and it's in a traditional sauce anyways. Some additional ideas: if you like spice, you could put in some chili pepper flakes, some paprika. You can always add an onion. So I made one recently, a pesto sauce, and I had some green onions, and I included both the whites and the greens, so the green more for the color and the onion, the white part, for the flavor, so you could do that. If you don't have fresh, you could do paste, powdered, or any other form, I guess. And then dried herbs if you would like. So if you're using maybe arugula as your base, but you do want some herbs and you have dried herbs such as oregano or basil or thyme or rosemary or something like that, you could always put them in too if you enjoy those flavors. So some tips when making your pesto: use a blender or food processor for an easy process. You need something that's going to blend and pulse all of those ingredients together, and this is really difficult to do by hand. I guess you could give it a go, but I would recommend a blender or a food processor. And you're placing all of your ingredients into your blender, which is what I use, and then on the top of most blenders there is sort of a cup, and you take it off and it leaves you with a hole into the blender, and you can slowly drizzle in your olive oil. I would recommend either placing your hand or a cloth over the top, so if the blender is very powerful, it's not splattering up, but you're still able to drizzle in the olive oil. Make it chunky. So this shouldn't be a puree per se, unless that's what you're aiming for. I personally like a more chunky pesto, so you can kind of see the whole herbs, the cheese, and so it's not so watery. And then I like to make a lot of it because you can store it in an airtight container and use it at a later point. It will stay good up to a week in your fridge, so that's good to keep in mind. If your pesto is too thick, or if you taste it and it's really heavy on the oil, you can sort of let it down or make it a little thinner with some water. That's always an option to make it a different consistency so it's not so chunky and thick. So what to make with pesto? Like I said earlier, pesto is a very versatile sauce, and you can really customize it with flavors and spices. So some things to make with it include chicken dishes. You can just spoon it over top of chicken. You could marinate chicken with it. Fish, so it pairs nicely with a salmon, with a whitefish. Stirred through pasta. It's even better when you make it yourself. You can buy jarred pesto sauces, but when you make it yourself, it's just a little more flavorful and customized to your preferences. You could put it on top of potatoes, so baked potatoes, roast potatoes, pretty much anything you want to put it on, you can put it on. So you could put it on beef, you could put it on pork, you could put it on top of vegetables. It's great on things like portobello mushrooms or cauliflower steak. So I hope you enjoyed this video on how to make pesto. This is my first sort of video on recipes and variations that I've made for YouTube. And I hope it was helpful and that you'll make pesto in the near future. Thanks for watching and listening. And if you are interested, I do have a blog and I will link it below. Thanks again.